Hello, Mr. Anthony.
How are we?
Hello.
How do I say it? Is it Brina or Brina?
It's Brina.
Brina. Okay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
How are you doing, Gert?
Very good.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
Have you shared where you are and what time it is over there?
Not yet. Why?
Just briefly talking about the floods because we've seen some images from Sydney, and I was just
Yes.
asking how things are going.
Where are you guys located?
I'm in Australia. Well, I'm in Sydney. Yeah. And Gert, where are you?
I'm in Madrid in Spain.
Oh,
Yeah, he's in all the way on the other side where there are no floods right now.
The safest place right now, apparently.
Absolutely. So let me just check. Can you just check that you can do sharing? Is it working for you?
Yeah, give me a second. Just a second. Yeah, should work, yeah.
Okay, so let me just bring this up.
Just quickly
Yep.
check.
Perfect.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
yes.
That looks good. Okay. So if you want to unshare for a second, I'm going to share my slide, and then I'll just do it in welcome, and then we'll get started. So now I'm going to apologize in advance. For some reason they decided to do some construction next door this morning, so it's driving me crazy.
I thought this was your team doing my case study.
Yeah, well, they've come back, so I'm not happy at all, but things happen and we move on. So the show must go on. So I want to just welcome everyone to the March Content Marketing Roundtable. So both of you are new to this session, and essentially what I'm doing is hosting a monthly event, which basically allows people to come in and get their questions answered around content marketing, anything related to using content to grow their business. And I'm also inviting guest experts and teachers like Gert, who's a good friend of mine, to come on to share their expertise and to really add value to the conversation, and also learn from the experience as well, because there are real businesses that jump onto this call, and they're sharing questions and challenges they're going through, and it's part presentation, but also part mastermind, and so it's a really good way to also introduce different people in different businesses and what they're doing, right? So I think that's a really cool thing to do right now. Okay, so let's get started. Today we're going to, I have a couple of other people who are meant to be joining, so I'm just going to send the link to them. But what we'll do is, I think if we can just, I'll flip the slides over to you, Gert, and you can bring yours up, and then we can get you started on sharing your tips on SEO.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. You're ready when you... Shall I just go ahead and start?
Yep, just go for it.
Perfect. Today, this is just a quick contribution on SEO and what it really takes to be set up for success. A little bit about my background. I've been doing SEO more and more over a period of 19. I think this slide is a little bit old. It's 20 years already. This definitely dates me a little bit. I'm originally from Austria, based in Spain, have been in Spain for more than 10 years. And I really work mostly with online businesses on site audits and ongoing consulting. Before we jump into how we do ongoing SEO essentially and what is a good approach to do it, we really want to establish why really bother about search engine optimization. SEO is trying to get websites ranked high in search engines. So why bother? The average internet user searches 3 to 4 times a day on Google. This means that Google receives 2 trillion searches per year. The number of times a certain keyword, a certain search term is being searched for is referred to as the volume. So the higher the volume of searches, the higher the potential exposure a brand can get to for their website. And what's really important is the moment someone searches on a search engine is a special moment because people really have set aside at least a few minutes to check something out. I personally was just earlier checking out wood sheds because I want to create a woodworking shed here in my backyard. And you just set aside a few minutes and say, hey, I'm going to check this out right now. See what I find. I really pay attention. I forward some links to my email address, maybe save some links in my bookmark list. I really set aside the time to really focus in, zoom in on what is actually, what content I actually can get, what information I can get out of it, and then make a decision. So I'm very often really close to the decision-making process, whereas when we compare this to social media, very often people might be weeks or months away from making a decision. In search engine, you get those people really in the right moment when you're ranking for the right search term. When it comes to SEO, content is really king. So what this means is that if you want to rank for a search term, you need to have the right content on your site in the first place to be eligible for a high ranking. The higher you rank on Google, the more exposure you get. And really in SEO, we talk about page 1 only, because if you're on page 2 or page 3 of Google, you really don't get hardly any exposure. Very often there is a saying that says the best place to hide a dead body is on page 2 of Google because nobody's going to look there. And this is really true because we really focus on Google. We trust Google to grasp in, search through hundreds of thousands of pages and bring us a selection that's exactly right for us. And they're doing actually a very good job, but there are some tweaks we can make from an SEO point of view with consistent work over time to get our page really ranking there. But definitely we need the content first to really be eligible, and we need to have a content that Google actually wants to rank. So here is the premise of an SEO project. You need to know your audience, I think, and there's probably a lot of parallels to an entire content marketing strategy here, but you can't do this if you don't know your audience, if you don't know how they search or what they expect to find when they perform a certain search, if you don't know how to present it to them, if you don't know what a search engine really wants to show their users when they search for this term, and then create this article and update it frequently. So Google is the major search engine in most countries. So let's say you want to rank for something on Google, you need to get an idea of how your audience is searching. So let's break this down with an example. Your audience might be, you might be selling, I don't know, wood sheds, right? So your audience might be searching wood sheds for the backyard, or wood sheds for woodworking, or wood sheds for, or tool sheds or something like this. You need to have a very good idea what your audience is going to expect. Are they expecting an e-commerce site? Are they expecting an article? Are they expecting a comparison? Are they expecting to see reviews? You really need to get an idea what they're searching about and then present a similar piece of content to them, because otherwise it's just not going to rank. If you have a query where users expect to land on an e-commerce site to make a purchase and you try to rank for a blog post, it's not going to happen. You need to match the type of content. So you present it to them in a way that really matches their expectations. And ultimately, it's really Google who is going to decide and tell us what people want to see. Google picks up all the data points from millions of searches every year, billions probably. So they really have the know what users want to find because they track user behavior. So imagine you get a search result, you click on it, you don't like what it is, what it's like, you go back to Google, click on another search result. This is behavior that Google really is picking up and can draw their conclusions. So if the first search result always then triggers a hit of the back button and someone clicking on the second result, and then apparently they never come back because they find what they're looking for, Google at some point is going to switch the results and say the second search result is really the one that should be on top of the search engines. The whole secret about SEO is really consistent execution of the right things. So there are probably 200 things you could do, and all of them would be good for SEO. Like I could do 200 things and probably all would be good for my health or my fitness. But then it really comes back to, if you ask my trainer in in the gym, they have a very good idea what I really should be doing and what I probably can forget about, because it's not going to have any effect. And in SEO, this is very much the same. So myself as a consulting, my main role for clients very often is to make them focus on the right things that have a chance to really move the needle and draw attention away from other things that could be technically quote unquote good for SEO, but ultimately are not going to do anything for them. What I've come to develop over the years is a framework I call ERICA. And ERICA is an acronym for evolution, research, interlinking, content, and action steps. I want to present this here because we have found it is a really efficient approach, if this is done right, to grow a site from zero or from wherever it is moving forward. Why? Because if I apply this framework, and we do this usually and recommend to do this every 2 weeks, if you apply this framework, you just get a very good idea about how a site performs over time, what actions that have been implemented are working, which ones are not working, what the competitive landscape is like. So the first step, for example, the evolution step, really aims at getting an overview, crawl the site, check the technical things, check the landscape, competitors, what's working for them, who's going up, who's going down, which rankings are going up, which rankings are going down. You establish like a status quo every couple of weeks. This is something we really do normally for a site with a site audit, establish a status quo and get an overview about everything, what's happening right now. But we do this with this framework every couple of weeks. So it's like getting a site audit every couple of weeks that puts you in a new status quo, and we say, okay, now this is the situation. There might be a Google update in the next week. So then this is the situation after the Google update. And only when you know exactly what the status quo is on your site and on the competitive landscape, you can then define what are the next high impact items you should be focusing on. The R for research is probably one of the most underrated elements. So there's a lot of research going on. Competitive research is just something we do every single day, researching user experience, things on a site, finding mobile issues, finding things that are related to any errors, security issues, performance issues, etc. on the site. This is just something that needs to be done on a regular basis. Many of our client sites get 70, 80, 90% mobile traffic these days, but maybe never check the site really on a mobile and always use Chrome on their computer's browser to really check the site, but don't have a feeling of what 70, 80% of their audience really struggle with when they come to their site, for example. So we focus a lot on usability, user experience testing with the main devices and clients are using, because otherwise we don't have a feeling on what they're dealing with. Then the I stands for interlinking. We call this, it's internal and external links. Links are still the main foundation of Google's algorithm. So everything then has been layered on, added as layers on top of the link-based algorithm. Links from a relevant other website to your site are going to help your rankings. Internal links from a page to another page also have a big impact. So we want to be aware of internal and external links on a regular basis. Then C really stands for content. So content is king. We already talked about this. We need to know which new content we need to build up. We need to know which content our competitors are ranking for where we don't have any rankings. And if the content is relevant for our target audience, we want to also bring this up. And we want to go back, and this is very often overlooked, we want to go back and refresh existing content. So content very often is put out with the idea of evergreen content, meaning content that doesn't get outdated. If I talk today about a healthy fitness routine, this doesn't necessarily get outdated. We know we should eat healthy, we should move our body, we should do this, we should do that. Apart from some trends, be it keto, be it, I don't know which, paleo or whatever diets, etc., that could be trendy then, the main essence hasn't changed over the years. So you could imagine that if you put out an article about a healthy lifestyle 10 years ago, it could be evergreen because it might still essentially contain the same aspects. However, user expectation changes heavily over time. So if you had like a 5,000, 10,000 words article describing all the aspects of healthy lifestyle, today it might be a 1,500 word article summary with an infographic, that is what users are really ready to consume and users expect. So even if the content is evergreen, effort to go back, see, is this still what users are expecting? Do they engage with this article? Do they bounce off a lot, etc.? And maybe rewrite it every few months, a little bit at least, to make sure it's still in line with what Google expects and users expect. And then the final step is action steps. Every couple of weeks, we line up what is going to be the focus in the 2 weeks afterwards before we do the whole process again. And this is a framework. We've published a book about it. Anthony was as kind as to push the link to the chat. The book can be downloaded for free, or it's available on Amazon for Kindle as well if you want. And we have developed an application where we essentially guide this process. So this is where we have just seen that applying this on a regular basis every 2 weeks is just something that really has a big impact and is definitely going to make sure that everybody working on this project focuses consistently on the right things and is going to keep them accountable. I want to quickly talk about team. When it comes to the team setup for SEO, we need to see that we need someone who is going to be able to create the content. We need to have someone who is going to be able to manage, to structure the content, update the content on a WordPress site, for example. And we need to have a very reliable tech support. So what this means is that this very often, sometimes, unfortunately, this is the same person on smaller companies. But it's not an ideal situation. Why? Because the tech support, for example, ideally you have a 24/7 tech support, because you never know when your site gets hacked. You never know when a plugin gets updated and might crash the entire site or the theme, or some issue happens. So our recommendation is usually to get a 24/7 service where you have multiple people who can step in and help you. You don't want to do this yourselves. And you also don't want to rely on a single person who might not be happy to just jump in, do half an hour work and then go off again, because it's going to take them a very long time to get these things sorted. So we have, for example, we had a client where we asked them to add a plugin to WordPress. And this was a task their programmer didn't really like, because there weren't a lot of billable hours there. It was like a 10-minute task. Essentially, they probably built half an hour. It took them 2 weeks to get this done, just because the entire site was relying on this single person in order to cover the tech support. So you really want to have a solid tech support. Having a working tech on a website is like very essential, like a car bringing you from A to B. You can get whatever brand you want, but you expect this car to bring you from A to B. We expect, and Google expects, a website to work perfectly from a technical side of things. Content creation definitely needs experience. We don't want to have low value articles. Google is smart enough these days to figure out if an article reads well, if an article is coherent, if an article is well structured. Copywriters are really happy about Google's evolution here. And definitely we also want to take into account that content needs to be structured. We don't want to only add to the list of content we have. This was like a habit that really came with the blogs being like diaries, and you just put out your thoughts and one thought after the other, and you have like an ongoing list of a flat list of pieces of content. On our recommendation, based on our recommendation, you should really have an idea where every piece of content is going to go in the overall structure. What are the main pillar articles? What are the main topics you talk about? What else? How can you explore those topics further? How can you connect this main pillar content with more specific articles? Imagine I talked about email marketing, introducing the topic. We would call this a pillar article. But then it could be a specific article about MailChimp. There could be a specific article about subject lines. There could be a specific article about open rates, for example. So we could go from a general topic that introduces the subject matter really down then with internal links to the respective articles. So whatever article you put up, you should have a very good idea where this goes in the overall structure, and maybe even have a spreadsheet. We call this a content map, where you map this out in a hierarchy and say, okay, this article goes below this article goes below this article, and have like a visual scheme of what your website looks like. And because this is going to also avoid that you have any duplications. We're dealing with sites sometimes that have like 1,500 different articles having been built up over many, many years, those people don't have any idea what they were writing 6 years ago. But if they maintain a structure, it would force them, the process would force them to find a place in their structure for the article. And they would then see that they already have been dealing with the same topic another time, and maybe could just rewrite the old article rather than put up a new, very similar one. We do recommend, not only because we do this for a living, but we see very good success when an existing team working on SEO has an external consulting service in their overall strategy, because an external consulting service is going to be independent from whatever is happening in the company. What we see very often is that SEO is the first thing where priorities get lowered, budget gets lowered, whatever happens on a company, SEO is the first thing. Why? Because SEO is a long-term game. It's not something you put out today an article, tomorrow you're going to get leads or sales. It's a long-term thing. So the connection between money here and giving this to the SEO agency and getting a return on investment isn't as direct as, for example, with Google ads, or maybe with Facebook ads, or some other content marketing or email marketing strategies. However, if you have an external institution checking your SEO, for example, every couple of weeks, the success rate is just automatically higher, because this external SEO is going to keep the entire team accountable, is going to keep the owner accountable. The owner is paying money for the service, so they have a very strong interest, and results ultimately are just much better. And then another thing I've listed here is link building. Link building is also something that very often I really recommend to outsource, because it's just really hard to build link building knowledge up in-house. Link building takes quite a few years of experience with reaching out to sites, finding sites, negotiating with site owners, getting links published, getting guest posts published, content writing skills, etc. It's a very diverse skill set to be a professional link builder and get really links that can help a site and are not harming a site. This is possible. There's a thing called negative SEO, where a site can also lose rankings with the wrong SEO efforts. So link building is definitely something that needs to be looked into, because as we said before, links are in the foundation of Google's algorithm, and links from relevant context pointing to an article really move the needle. This was just a really big brief overview. If you have any questions on SEO, just email me. My email address is here. We also are over at seoleverage.com. The book can be downloaded for free. We've got quite a few articles there, quite some material, demos on how we work on these things with clients. I think, and we had a few questions also coming. Do you want to check them out?
Yep, that's right. So if you want to...
Yep, I'm sure.
Yep, that's cool. So first, thanks so much, Gert, for the quick presentation. I think that's gives us a nice snapshot of the importance of SEO, why we want to really focus that on for a new, even an existing site. Because I know that I've been working with you for my site, which has been up for almost 6 years now, and so it's always good to work with an expert to understand, hey, like what's new. Google's changing all the time, as you mentioned. The rules, or what's called the algorithms, shift. And so if you're not up to speed on that, and you're not a specialist and you're not researching that all the time, then it's very easy to do things which can potentially damage your website. And I know that we're currently working on a case study for you where one of your clients got hit by a what do you call it, a panda or one of these things.
A penalty, yeah. An algorithm update. It wasn't even a penalty. It was just Google shifting gears and saying, look, this site is going to lose 70% of the traffic. Yeah,
and so so basically for Judith and Bruno, just for context, so Gert had this client who had been building a website for 6 years. So we're getting a ton of traffic coming, people visiting the site, customers and everything. And then overnight they lost 75% of their traffic just for one update that Google did. And then he came to Gert and Gert sorted it out. But so let's get into the questions. And I think the way we're going to do this, I've got a few that have been submitted to me. So I've got Judith, I've got your question. I've got Bruno, your question as well. But I know you might have other questions that have come from what Gert has already spoken about. So the way we'll do this is we'll basically open up the floor to each person. And if you can just quickly introduce yourself, the business that you're working on right now, and then pose the question, and then that way we can actually address one at a time. Okay, so we'll take one question at a time, and we've got enough time limit to actually maybe cover 2 questions per person. But why don't we start off with, I think, Judith, you've got a particularly SEO relevant question. So let's throw over to you and you can introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your business. And then, yeah, and then just let us know how can we help you in this session?
Hi, I'm Judith Botel. Sorry, first of all, apologies for being late. I had some household things I needed to do. What can I say? Okay, Albany Lane Consulting is my company. I set it up in 2012 and launched a website then, and then about a year later I launched another website as things became a bit clearer about what I was actually doing. That now, the platform for that is actually being retired, so I do need to create a new one, and I've been working on Kajabi to do that because I also want to have some online courses, or actually some of my material and IP available online. My business is a coaching business. I mostly specialise in leadership coaching, career coaching, and I also do strategic consulting work. And I do that mostly because of my background with the creative and arts industry or sector, and also a bit with the community sector. But that ranges from like big tech companies to little small to medium company, well, micro organisations really, run on the smell of a volunteer and a part-time coordinator type of stuff. And I have a lot of individuals in there as well who come to me when they want to sort out their career a bit, and their career or their business plan or whatever. Like last year, I had a lot of people come in saying, well, I had all these plans for 2020. None of it's going to happen. Can we get on this and come out with a plan B? So as I said, I've been doing that for 8 years. So pretty well established in that sector. But I do want to sort of start to, I don't know, try and widen the message a bit about what I'm doing. And I need a new platform. So there we go. So my website at the moment, if you go to www.albanylane.com.au, is really out of date. It doesn't really reflect who I am at the moment. So it's probably a good time anyway. Now, in part of this transition, I of course need to, I had that original website builder do the SEO for the site. It has been, no, the site hasn't been hacked, but the mail has been hacked a couple of times because it's a bespoke bit added onto that website. Anyway, that's not the main issue. But the main issue I was thinking is, how much of this can I do myself? I got a bit frustrated with everything being outsourced. It had to be that way because I was doing, you know, it was kind of a side hustle to start with. So a lot of things got outsourced. But now I want to bring back more control. And I find that these new platforms really allow you to do a lot more by yourself. And I'm enjoying that a great deal because then I can really make sure the message is on point. Whereas every time I try and describe what I do to a third party, it gets confused. It gets watered down. People try and turn me off what my message is. And I know that my message resonates. That's one thing that's very important. So control is very important to me. So I'm wondering, how much of this can I do myself? And I realize you're trying to sell me a service, so you're probably going to say, oh, none. But, you know, I really would like to know, you know, how far can I go on this myself to make sure I'm really protecting what I'm creating here,
yeah.
And not getting sort of, I feel like I've 8 years ago, I didn't perhaps make the right decisions. Whereas now I feel like I have a lot more confidence in my message and I want that to get through. And so how do I keep control if I do choose to outsource something, and how much can I actually do myself so I don't need to outsource?
Over to you, Gert. That's a great question, Judith.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us context. It's always interesting to see where things come from. Let me tell you how we, for example, work with clients. So many of our clients are very small teams around an online business like yours, courses, coaching, things like those, right? we're not industry experts in every industry. We work everything from, I've worked on a ferret site, I've worked on a multinational internet service provider, we have worked on an astrology side, we have worked on a guitar side, saxophone side, all kinds of things. I've got no idea about these topics, honestly, right? Or I didn't have one until I started to dive a little bit into this. I'm not a subject matter expert. So what we try essentially with our approach is to match our experience with SEO with the experience of our clients in their subject matter. So what this means in practice is that I can guide my clients in what a good SEO article is, what a good keyword to target is, what an article should be they could be writing about. I'm not going to tell you only the article, but I'm going to also tell you which subtopics this article should be dealing with, how long this article should be, what the structure should be. So you can then work on your message and create this content when it comes to an article, right? This was just the content creation process is what I'm hearing is really what you're referring to, because I don't think you have an issue with outsourcing the tech side of things, getting a developer help you with something that needs to be fixed on your side. I understand with Kajabi, there's probably little to do on the WordPress side. Usually there are more things that come up. But when it's really, if this is really about the content creation process, I think what you need is not a content writer. It's a consultant helping you with what needs to be done on your articles so they can really rank. What we see, especially with a lot of industry experts, is that they want to write about what they know people are interested in. But this is not necessarily the text that's going to rank. So there's nothing more frustrating than if you have the best article out there about the subject matter, but nobody is seeing it because Google doesn't rank it, just because this is not this article structure Google wants for their users. So you want to pair industry experience with SEO experience and make sure that your messaging comes across, but in a way that is possible to rank. Very practical example with a person working as some sort of life coach, so to speak. He's got his idea on what the content should be, and we then, for example, suggest what is missing on this content and put this below it, just to make sure that we also cover some other topics. And he then edits this to make sure we don't say anything that shouldn't be said on his site, and then this goes live. So we essentially pair what he wants to bring across with what we need to bring across to get a ranking. And then our way of phrasing this is going to get updated or corrected or edited by him. So we really match his overall tone, and then this goes up. Right? I think if an SEO agency tries to work on or tell you what the messaging is, you need to be really careful, right? This is like overstepping responsibilities or experience a little bit, right? What we do try to find is really a way to consistently just produce quite some content that matches, that is in line with what you want to bring across. But then for example, we're working with an architect, right? Right now, I've got no idea about architecture, let alone the legal situation in architecture in California. So what I do is I send him a content outline and say, look, this is what you should write about. This is what the subtopics should be. This is what the length should be. Tell me an angle. Tell me what is your point of view about this. And then with this content outline, we go to the writers here, create an article, send this back, get the feedback again, make 1 or 2 tweaks, and then put this up.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Where does that advice come from? Is that based on, do you have constant market research of what people are looking for? Is this coming through Google Analytics? What is it that you're drawing on?
We're paying more than $3,000 every month for tools.
Right.
Okay, so these are SEO tools. These are market research tools. We constantly monitor what is happening on page 1 for a certain key term.
Right.
And establish the gap between the article we want to rank. So if you have, for example, an article ranking on page 2 of Google, you're probably actually really good, because this might be position 15 out of 500,000. Right? But still not good enough to make the jump to page 1. So we want to establish the gap between your article and what is ranking. And very often these are just really common terms. So for example, I remember this internet service provider, they didn't have the term internet connection on their page because it was just so obvious. They're an internet service provider. What should this be about? However, if you're a Google and if you're a dumb machine learning algorithm, having this term internet connection there is just really important because many people are going to search for this. And this is how people want to consume this content. So very often we can this way discover very obvious answers or obvious gaps that industry experts miss because it's just very, very obvious, but it's just part of the game. Okay.
So your advice is based on that research.
On research, on constant research, absolutely. I can't be an expert in every industry.
No,
right? If I was only working with life coaches, probably at some point I don't need the tools anymore. I probably have a good feeling. But then again, as I was saying earlier, not sure if you were here already, is that user expectations change all the time. Even if you have like a topic that has not been changing for 20 years, the way you talk about it and the way you present it needs to be adapted every few months. And we need to go back and rewrite this article just based on what users expect to consume.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'll add sort of the content strategist perspective on that and the copywriter perspective. It basically, I agree that the technical aspect, I think, Judith, your question is not around the technical. It's like, how do I get my sites faster? How do I, get it to load right and these sort of things? Because I don't think that's what you're really concerned about. You're more concerned about the voice of the message and your expertise and to demonstrate, look, this is what, I know the clients and I've worked in the industry, I know certain things. And this comes up as a constant, as a copywriter. I get this a lot from my potential clients and they say, oh, how can you write in my voice? And I say, well, I don't. Right. So my role is to save you all the time in doing all the research required. And I actually do work with Gert and others who have the expertise to then say, look, the topic, we'll leave that to the expert, but what we really want to focus on is how do we make sure that it's seen, because you've probably done that before. You publish a whole bunch of content, articles, whatever, and it just doesn't go anywhere, right? You put it on your site and you might get lucky and one or two of those might get found, but a lot of content, if I would, we were to look at everyone's websites right now, 98% of that content is not doing anything. It's just there, right? And so it's good to in that sense work with someone who can do the research side of it. I mean, you can certainly go and invest yourself in doing it, but having gone through that journey myself over the last few years, I'm nowhere near the capability of what Gert and his team can do. I'm not pushing like Gert's service. I would recommend you actually talk to 3 different SEO service providers, one of them being Gert's service. But the reason I've got him on this call today is because I know he delivers, and I know his team do an amazing job, not only for me, but for my clients as well. So, and we've got some what's the word, Gert? Shared clients, right? So we're doing some content together. Clients, yeah, so he does all the SEO strategy and all the SEO work and consulting for the client, and then they come to me and go, Anth, can you help me write and produce the article? And we've actually done that together a couple of times. So I hope that answers the question, Judith.
No, that's incredibly helpful. Incredibly helpful. I'll leave it there. Cool. And let somebody else have a go. Yep.
So we'll move on, and then if you have any other questions, please pop them in the chat, and then if we have some time, I think we'll have some time at the end. We'll come back and revisit, right? So let's go to Brina. Brina, I want to just introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about your startup and what you're working on, and the question that you put in when you submitted earlier.
Okay, so right now I have an idea. It's called 7 Days of Grateful. So I hope to use like art, writing, and music that acts as a support to people. Self-talk, landing page, and Instagram to grow the following. But for WordPress, I have articles on my website, 7daysofgrateful.com, with the number 7daysofgrateful.com. But it seems that I only have like maybe 2,000 views and like 10 followers for the past 2-3 years. So it's not really growing. And I want to test it out by making a short prototype for the landing page and growing the following in WordPress and also growing the following in Instagram, because I think for the visual aspects such as art, writing, music content, people usually use Instagram for that, and it's kind of hard to see the analytical like tools of Instagram, like how do they target and how do you grow your following. So that's my issue right now.
Okay, so
if this is more on your end, I think.
Yeah, there's two aspects to the question. So Brina, thanks for sharing. So 7daysofgrateful.com. I had a look at the site. I think the content is very thin. And what I mean by that is there's not enough content on there for Google to look at that and say, hey, I want to, push people your way, right? Because something that and this is where SEO comes into it, and Kurt, I'll defer to you in a moment. The other aspect is you want to grow. I think you mentioned, Brina, you've had the site on for 3 years, I think, and yeah, right. And so now what you want to do is you're looking at acquisition. So you actually want to get more people engaged with, with what you're doing, and you want to get more followers or whatever it may be. And you mentioned Instagram. And I think Instagram can be, and this kind of relates to the question Judith just popped into the chat here as well, around do you use social media like LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. Right? It's the way that I see that is, let me just get my slides up here. Give me a second, because I like to draw when I teach. So just, it just helps me conceptualize, but it helps you guys understand. So let's go to Brenda's question. All right, so let's go here. So the way, you might have heard of this concept before, but it's typically called hub and spoke. And so, or another way I like to frame it is you have a house, right? And so you go, this is your house, which is the like Gert's website. It's going to be 7 Days of Grateful. Okay, and then what you're trying to do is you're saying you're going to use IG, right? And how often are you posting to Instagram at the moment,
Once a week.
Once a week, okay. So first thing I'd say that's very low if you're going to use Instagram, right? I would actually increase that to daily if you can, because with social media platforms, the feeds move so fast, right? Particularly Twitter is crazy. Twitter is like ridiculous every second. It changes. Facebook is a bit slower. Instagram is so fast, and with Instagram you really have to get in on the hashtags and really do some research around what are some of the hashtags that people are searching for, that relate to the topic you're talking about, right? You're talking about gratitude. Tell me a bit about the 7 Days of Gratitude, 7 Days of Grateful. What is the purpose, or let's frame it another way. How does it help people? What challenge do people have that this helps solve?
So actually it's more on personal and faith, the beginning of the app, but the beginning of the blog. But I realized that more people, I don't want it to be like faith-based, but I want it to be like a place where people can look at the art and have encouraging and hopeful words, so that they can like go through difficulties in life. For example, if they have anxieties or worries, then they can focus and remind themselves to be grateful every day, so that they can follow and live life to the fullest. So that's my purpose. Good.
So I like that. So for me, it's about giving people hope. It's about giving people a way to work through some of the challenges and struggles they may be having, on a daily basis. Was that accurate?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So then you need to look at framing your communication and your message around, okay, who's the message for, right? What is the message, right? And then what's the action? I'm looking at your site and I come to your site and there's no way for me, beyond just reading your content, right? There's no way for me to join a newsletter. There's no way for me to actually, like you talk about acquiring or acquisition, right? Then you got to have an acquisition step, right? So is there a newsletter people can subscribe to? Is there a podcast that you're doing? Is there, even if you're doing a blog, a lot of blogs used to do RSS feeds. Good. Is that still a thing? Like is RSS still, like the people?
RSS is definitely still a thing. I like what you, I just want to mention something. I had a guy called Tom Poland on a podcast recording lately. Tom Poland focuses on lead generation, for example, and he talks about the first date. So you need to offer a first date on your blog before you ask people to something else. People come to your page if they like what they see, they want to have this first date, and this can be a newsletter, this can be like an entry-level product or something like this can be a download, something. You need to give them something to engage with you and to really have a reason or have a way to come back. So I might not be right now when I discover this site in a moment where I can really engage and read all the content, etc. But if this is interesting for me, I might sign up, like Enf says, for a newsletter or download maybe some quotes, some inspiring quotes, motivational, uplifting quotes or something like this. This can be a simple PDF where it's okay, I download this, have this on my phone. If I have a moment where I need some positive energy, I can go through this, whatever it may be. And then if you really want to look at this from an SEO perspective, you really need to identify how people would search for this. So if someone goes to Google, how would they search for positive thoughts or positive messaging or positive or uplifting content, etc.? They're not going to look for gratefulness. Gratefulness, I understand, is one of the means of getting where they want to get, but they probably have some issues you could be talking about, and then help them figure out a way how they can think about a problem differently, for example. So SEO traffic and traffic to your site from search engines is always going to depend on how good you identify what we call a search intent, which is the reason why someone is going to go to Google and what they're going to type in to find it. Okay, if you just put out content that doesn't correspond to any search intent, Google doesn't know what to do with it. Google doesn't know who this is for and can't drive traffic to your site.
Yeah, so a couple of, just to add to what Gert's saying there, Brina, is this making sense so far? So one thing is you have an audience you're trying to reach, right? So typically the flow is, you put something out which attracts people to come to your website. Typically we call that the house, right? So you think of it like this is your house, and you want people to come to your house because at your house, that's where you can really serve them, right? You can, serve them a nice dish. You can, play games, whatever it is that you do, right? In your case, it might be a prayer, right? Whatever that you do there. And that could be what your next step is. You might offer them some kind of gratitude meditation. You could offer some kind of some audio where you speak a sermon or something like that is useful to those people, right? And that's fine, right? But you definitely want to have a next step on your website, so people, and that actually allows you to also then they download the thing that you give them, which is a nice gift, right? And then now they're on your email list. So now you can actually have a way to communicate with them, on a regular basis, right? And add more value, right? The goal here is not just to build a list for the sake of building a list. It's actually to build a relationship with people who are visiting your website and who are interested in what you're doing. Okay, and I hope this I know Judith's already doing this on her side. I know Deb's doing this to some degree on her side as well. So, but I think that's important. Now, frequency is important. I'm looking at your website, and when I'm looking at the site, I feel, the story, your story, that to me doesn't speak to, if I'm coming to your site, I'm like, oh, I've got some stuff I need to I want some help with. It'd be nice to know what are the different areas that you can support them with, right? Like what are the, if someone's looking for gratitude, what's on the flip side of that? Like what kind of challenges typically is going on for them? Are they dealing with frustration? Are they dealing with loss of hope? Are they dealing with depression? What's on the other side of that for them where gratitude becomes a solution, right? Which is what Gert's basically saying. He's saying, okay, what are they searching? If they go to Google and they're searching for, I need help with X, right? What is X? Okay. And then by them doing that search, what should happen is that, one of your articles comes up on the first page and it says, okay, well, if you're looking for, you're feeling like you've lost hope right now, here's, 10 ways you can get, hope back in your life or something like that. Right. And if you're dealing with COVID depression, which is a real thing, like that's actually a real thing, right? Okay, here's an article that actually helps you actually manage that better. you know, and then that way that can then, you can then produce articles which relate to those keywords. People start finding your site. Now you're getting the SEO sort of machine working. Now, where Instagram comes into it is Instagram can accelerate, right, what you're doing with your content. Okay, so if you start putting articles that speak to specific challenges that people are having, and they could be stories of someone turning rejection into success, or you know, fear into acceptance, right? There's a transformation that occurs. Okay, and what you're saying is your 7 days of Grateful is a place where that transformation can occur, and we can help you with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I really like your advice and Gret's advice, and like I would like to know more about how I can get help in this area forwards.
Okay. Yep. So I think, you know, well, one thing that I definitely, if you want to talk about it, I'm going to share a link with everyone in a follow-up email, which is an invitation to jump on a call with me for 15 minutes, and we can just talk about your specific goals, and then I can give you sort of a quick consult and let you know ways that you can work with me. If you're looking for help with SEO specifically, Gert and his team offer an SEO audit, which I think is currently $20 or something like that. Is that right, Gert?
It's a quick audit. Yeah, definitely gives you a little bit of a first insight. There's not really anything going on with SEO. I was just quickly checking out your site with a few tools in the background. I think one thing you really want to look at is what we call a keyword research. And the keyword research is just something that tells you how your target audience is searching, which keywords they type into Google when it comes to topics like, I don't know, positive thoughts, uplifting content, gratefulness, things like those. Find a lot of variations, questions. You might want to search on Quora.com or Reddit, for example, for gratefulness. Just read people's thoughts, read how people ask questions, and every question essentially could be a topic for an article for you. And this would then be an article that answers the question actual people have. So this is a very good starting point where you just research your audience, research how they talk on forums, how they talk on Facebook groups, how they talk on what they ask specifically on Quora. How does gratefulness work, or how can I be more grateful, or whatever could be questions coming up here, for example. You could then write articles about those, just to start a process where you say, okay, whatever goes on as a content isn't just a thought you want to share, but if you expect to get traffic to it, it should be an answer to someone's question. Okay, so it's one thing that we share a thought. This is not intended for Google. This might be shared on social media, that's fine, but it's not intended for Google. We usually recommend to even no index it, meaning telling Google specifically that this article isn't for them. And then you've got articles where you want search traffic, and there we definitely need to look into what is the question my article is going to be the answer for, and make sure that this is going to be a good answer. And then also maybe do some research and say, okay, what are other articles answering when someone types in this question on Google? Check what comes up, just to make sure that your answer is in both depth and quality in line with what is ranking out there. And if you do this consistently over time, you have a much better chance at getting things ranking than if you just put out content and essentially then leave everything up to Google to decide if they want to have it or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there are, so yeah, we have a ton of resources I can share with you, but definitely I think next steps is just the fingers on the right hand side here. I hope you can see those. I'll send this to you as well, but definitely we can take a screenshot right now if you like. You want to really, now ignore the speaking and the LinkedIn. This is basically me being sneaky and answering Judah's question at the same time. But what you have is you have your website in the middle, right? That's your property. You kind of manage the message and you know, the content that goes on there. You want to really have content that speaks to solving people's specific questions and challenges, and right, which is what Gert's talking about. That's where an SEO strategy becomes important. Okay, and doing an SEO audit or SEO keyword research, these things are important steps, because what you're saying here is that you're going to do the work to understand what people are actually looking for, and then you're going to produce content that actually answers those questions, right? And that actually helps. It's use helping them, and by doing so, you know, you can then move people to the next step, which is whatever it is for you. Okay, and then. Which sits on top of all of this is actually a content strategy, and this is the work that I do, right, with business owners. Is basically go, okay, well, you know, SEO strategy is one part of a content strategy, right? But you also need to think about your buyer persona. Who is the people who's going to buy from you? What is it that, you know, Judith talked about for her business? She consults to organizations, but she also talks to individuals, right? So there's a mix. And so what you need to do is do the work to understand, okay, who is really like, who can I really best help? Okay, and then that's where the buyer persona comes into effect, and we do some work around that. Okay, and then so I run a workshop which basically we go through and develop your content strategy, and then, you know, it's 2 hours. We actually work through all the different elements, and we get right into, okay, here's the goal of what I'm trying to achieve. Here's the way I'm going to get there. Okay, and this is sort of the mini strategy that you're seeing on the screen at the moment, right? Now, okay, I'm going to quickly go to Judith and we'll come to Deb. But Judith, with your question while we're here is, okay, you're not using Instagram, that's fine, but you could. And then other things that you could be doing is you're probably doing speaking engagements. You might be getting onto a podcast, or you're getting onto webinars. Something that's worked incredibly for me, and I know Gert's doing that. He went crazy last year and got into a ton of podcasts and got interviews. And that was part of his strategy, was to get in front of other people's audiences that are, you know, a similar audience to that his business serves. And then he basically goes and finds, you know, his 20 podcasts or 10 podcasts that are, you know, my audience listens to, and I'm going to go and appear on those podcasts. And that's a way to actually demonstrate expertise. But also what happens is then on every interview that he does, he basically says, hey, by the way, I've got this free book, you know, which is a great resource, right? Come and get it. It's free. Here's a link, right? And, you know, going meta here, but we actually did that in this conversation, right? So you can see that. So what that does is, you notice that you're drawing people from these different platforms back into the website or to your resource, right? Which then is the conversion resource. When I say conversion, it means that they're now joining your email list, or they're booking a call with you, or they're doing something. There's an action to signal, hey, I'm interested in learning more about what you do and how you might help me. Does that make sense? So Jude, if you had a question around, is there a specific question do you want to add to doing LinkedIn and doing these other things and social?
Yeah, the question was, I mean, all respect here, but I'd get 1,000 of these offers through LinkedIn, and I think you jumped out. That's why we're still continuing to stay in touch. Is there something in what you said that resonated, and which is great. It cut through a lot of people. And a lot of people are saying, you know, how we can leverage your LinkedIn. And now, of course, LinkedIn, you can do lives, you can do all this stuff. I won't say crap, all this stuff on LinkedIn. And and Facebook, you know, similarly has all this stuff. And it looks like Insta's doing the same things. Just wondering how, if you have limited resources and limited time, is it where to invest your money?
Good question.
That's probably the best question I've got.
Okay, so where are the majority of your customers coming from historically in the last 7 years? Word of mouth? Okay.
Word of mouth, website, some through hashtags, links. Okay. I've found things that way. I found my blogs that way.
Yep.
And some have been following my newsletter since day one almost, and come that way. Yeah.
Right.
I was trying to think back, and so quite a few come through the website, but they've been searching for something else.
Okay. Yeah.
No, that's not correct. Some are searching for me. Some are searching for something else.
Yeah. So there's an exercise that I encourage you to do soon, which would be to actually work out, maybe do a Google sheet or a spreadsheet, whatever you want to do, or pen and paper, and just go, okay, let's rank, right? Look at the last 5 clients or the last 10 clients. Let's rank where they came from.
Yeah.
Okay. And really get clear. If you're saying, you know, from a hunch, you're saying it's word of mouth, that's fine. I'd like you to actually get more like data on that, and to go, actually, you know, they came through, you know, this referral from Margaret's actually referred 3 people to me, and that's actually where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Right. So word of mouth, to me, we can get more granular on that and go,
Yeah.
let's get really clear where word of mouth comes from, because it could be that you're part of a chamber of commerce somewhere, and that's where they're really coming from. It could be that you've done one particular speaking engagement last year, and that's the one that, you know, where it's all coming from. Like, I can tell you, I did 12 podcast appearances last year, and most of the people coming to my site are coming from one podcast.
Right.
And so now I know, I might actually want to go back to them and pitch them another idea to get onto their podcast again, right? Because it makes sense, right? Because that's where the traffic's actually coming from, right? And so now to answer the question, do I invest in LinkedIn, right? There's a lot of time, you know, any platform you choose, I would say, where at the stage of business you're at right now, I would think that, you know, narrow in on 1 or 2 key channels. Right? And by channel, that can mean, you know, anything like speaking engagements. It can mean word of mouth can be a channel. But if word of mouth is high for you, then I would really think about how can I then introduce some kind of referral program or something where I actually can track where those referrals are coming from, right? Because then that actually helps you. Then this is something I did with one of my clients last year, was we actually introduced a referral program. We then were able to then work out, okay, here are 10 people that are referring us, and we actually narrowed down to the top 20%. We actually went, these 2 people are bringing in all the referrals, right? Everyone else are saying they're referral partners, but they're not actually doing the work to refer us, okay? And so guess what we did? We then sent gifts to the people who were referring us and said, thank you. And, you know, we want to develop this relationship further, and we want to send you business your way too, because now it becomes, you know, this perpetuating system, I suppose. And that's something that, you know, like, to be transparent, that's the reason why I've got Gert back onto my webinar with you guys, because we've been working together really nicely over the last year and a half since we met last year in Sydney for a conference, and it's just like we clicked, right? And I wasn't put off by his weird Austrian accent. So, you know, focus your time and energy. You've got limited resource. I would say if you're exploring LinkedIn, I want to ask you why. Okay, is it because, you know, 80% of your clientele are actively using LinkedIn? All right. So if you actually went to your clients, say, you know, ask 5 people, how often are you on LinkedIn? And I'm talking about the 5 best clients you've got, right? You know, they pay you a good rate. They pay you a good rate. They show up. They do the things you want them to do. And say, are you active on LinkedIn? Right. If they say, yeah, on it all the time, always messaging, whatever, I'm watching LinkedIn lives a lot, you go, okay, that's probably a good channel for me to explore, right? But if they come back to you, go, crickets, nah, it's spammy, don't care, right? Then you're doing the research to understand, are your prospective buyers going to be there, right? Now you can do a lean version of LinkedIn, which is like, you know, at a minimum, whenever you put an article on your site, you just share it out onto LinkedIn, right? Just here's an article I just published, you know, go check it out, something like that. But the power in any of these platforms, and I'm talking to Bruno as well for IG, the power in these platforms is not actually in you posting stuff. It's actually you searching for people who fit your customer avatar and then messaging them and starting to build relationships in chat. That's actually where the magic happens. Now, you mentioned you're getting 1,000 of these messages a day from people trying to sell you stuff, right? And I would imagine the reason why I got cut through was because I didn't try and sell you anything. I said, look, I'm just doing this event and I invite you to come along, right? And that's the way I approach business development, is to actually invite people to have an experience and let them decide for themselves, right? So if you're doing a talk soon or a webinar soon, or you're doing a podcast, or you're putting an article out, that's a good way to engage with them, right? You could do a search for 10 companies that fit the profile you want to work with. You then connect with the individuals in their roles, and you go, hey, you know, I really like what you're doing at your company. We do consultancy, and I think we could, you know, at some point maybe collaborate. I'd love to learn more about you. Maybe you invite them onto a 15-minute Zoom call just to get to know them, right? And so I'm not going to sell anything. I just want to have a chat just to get to know how we might work together. And by the way, here's a guide I've put together, or here's an ebook that I've done before, or here's some training that I've delivered that might be useful for you, right? And then you know, then you have your follow-up process every 3 months or every whatever. You go back to them and just check in how they're doing, or you get them on. You know, the natural thing for you to do is to invite them onto your newsletter, right? I've got this newsletter. I send it out. What's the frequency that you send it out, Judith?
It was once a month up until about the end of last year.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So, you know, just get clear around that frequency. So if it's monthly, if it's every 3 months, whatever, just let people know. You know, at this time, now that we're in a pandemic, I actually advocate at least monthly, if you can do it. Get into the habit of doing that. It's actually why I rebooted my newsletter last year, because I knew this is a good time to actually add value and actually share, you know, your expertise and share the things that you're doing. And people don't know, like, you know, they're on your list, but they've never heard from you. They haven't heard from you, or they're not actively following you. And then you just send an email and letting them know, hey, here's something that, like, it's been a while since we had a chat. Here are the projects that I'm working on now. All right. And so they're like, oh, and maybe they've changed their role in whatever they're doing, and they've changed companies. They've gone, actually, we could use your services. So, you know, it's good to stay in touch that way. And I hope, Brina, you're getting sort of some insights.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the Instagram, you mentioned that we have to reach out and connect and talk to them. So is that like a private DM and like
correct
talking to people we don't know?
Yes, this is the goal. The goal is to get people you don't know and turn them into people that you know. Okay. And so it's not a scalable thing. This is not I will bring a Facebook ads expert onto one of these sessions soon, but it's very different when you're sending ads to people and you're disrupting their natural flow. Okay.
Is there something we can do that's not, am I muted? Probably.
No, we can hear you.
I'm off. Not Facebook, please, not Facebook.
Well, don't do Facebook. That's fine. Yeah, get off them. That's all. But I'm just saying, you got to work out, and this is why it's important to identify who your avatar is. Who is it that you're trying to reach? You know, Brina, your message. Oh, okay, but you know, it might be for you, Judith. You might work better in groups. Okay, you might be better off going to specific Facebook groups. Pick 3 where you know that these people are they're active, and then you're not there to sell. You're there to really just answer people's questions. And Gert does this really well. Just answer people's questions. And so, hey, you know, this is what we've done with a client, or this is, you know, what I recommend. And people start to build. They're seeing you in there active, and they go, oh, she knows her stuff. All right, I've got a question.
That is actually where I've been getting a lot of referrals.
Yeah, there you go.
I do recommend it. I mean, you've got to be very careful not to pitch.
Yeah.
And because it's a very respected group.
Yeah.
So you've got to be very respectful of the rules, and it's an invite-only one. Yeah. And so it's one that people really value, and that's where I get a lot of. You know, my latest client was purely. Somebody said, I need somebody to do this. And 5 people said, Judith.
Boom, you're doing it. That's it.
Yeah. So it does really work. I mean, Facebook is evil, but it does work.
Yeah. Get rid of the rest of it. Don't get involved in that. Just stick with the groups that we're active in. That's fine. For Brina, I mean, that could work for you too, Facebook groups. But, you know, for Instagram, I would be looking at first identify who it is you're trying to reach. Okay. What type of accounts. And then you would then start, you know, following them and engaging with them. So social media needs to be, you know, the engagement part is not just you sharing something, posting something and hoping people will engage with you. You have to flip that and actually go and engage with them, right? Because people start caring about you and you demonstrate you care for them, right? Like this is natural human behavior, okay? We're gonna move over. Deb, are you there? Can you hear us? So I want to thank Judith for the question and Brina for your questions. They're great. And I know we're a bit over time, folks. If you need to drop off, that's fine. But we want to go for 5 minutes here. Deb?
I'm going to have to go. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Judith.
Bye.
We'll talk to you soon. Deb, you're on mute.
I should be on mute now.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
How are you doing?
Okay. So. I mean, as you know, I have been doing things at the moment, but I'm in no state to sort of massively activate a marketing strategy at the moment. What I have been doing is a lot of LinkedIn posts.
Yes, you have.
And articles, and I've been surprised. I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm getting quite a few views. So I think what I'm going to have to do, and I think it will be the sort of audience I'm looking for. With my website, I haven't yet set up blogs. I've done a few, but I've got a lot of ideas for blogs. The people people I've mainly picked up from websites have been attracted by the fact that I say I don't deal in the mainstream. They're sort of oddballs, and they've seen me as an editor of oddballs, if you like. So, and I do actually think that's probably something I should pursue, because with my LinkedIn posts, they're not the usual LinkedIn posts. I mean, they're sort of little comments. So I suppose I'm going to have to get LinkedIn Premium at some point, because I am trying to build up a list, because I've got a book that I want to try and launch in November, which in itself is sort of oddballs. And I want to have a good email list that I can then translate into contacting with a newsletter. I don't want to send out a newsletter till I know that I can fill it with something interesting. And in a way, I'm using the launch of this book, which is it's something I've been working on for a while. It's on long-term lesbian couples who married, and then all sorts of ramifications of that, linking into how COVID affected their relationship and this, that, and the other. But I want to do an ebook on that initially, and then print on demand. Sure. And I've been saving all these different community groups that I will be contacting. So I've got about 10 to 12 community groups. And I've got an idea of, there's a magazine who would run I've never done a podcast, but they're doing podcasts, and I'm thinking I should do a bit of a podcast on introducing my idea, how long it's taken. We've gone through a lot of illnesses, and it really has been a case of, for better or worse, living creatures. And it's still an interesting topic. I thought it would all have died, but it hasn't. Partly because of the religious elements of it too, because a lot of the women I interviewed actually did come from very religious backgrounds, and that was a bit of a problem for them. So yes, all the community groups and magazines and so on, they would be a target audience for a newsletter. I still see that emails are still being used and valued. And I do think for the sort of audience I'm after, I should stick with something more traditional. I don't want to blast them with Instagram and everything else. I think that's too much. For my blogs, I've also been building up a list of unusual, mainly women, artists, commentators, and so on. So I do want to use the blog, not so much just to promote my services, but mainly to show that I actually am very interested in non-mainstream people, if you like, and also people with a voice, which is important. So I'm using my blog in a way, when I started properly, to show where I'm coming from, rather than, oh, I can teach you editing and this. There's enough people teaching. I'm an editor writer. There's enough people doing that. I'd like to link in with them, but rather than take over from them.
Cool.
So I think I'm really pursuing this idea of difference. I don't want to use the word diversity, it's overused. Because that seems to be the way people have wanted to use my services. They've seen me as someone who, you know, will take them as they are. You know, I haven't got any agenda, if you like.
Yeah. All right. So, Deb, so I get what you're doing. Thanks for the context. Gert, the question here is how to leverage SEO so that
well, this is the problem. I'm not sure. I don't think, I mean, I've got a number of keywords. I've done keyword research. I really need to update my website and use a lot of more of those terms. But in terms of leveraging SEO, I've come to this because I want some ideas, if you like.
Yep. So we're going to do this. So a lot of what you shared is very similar to what Brina's doing. Very different audiences and different messages, but sort of a similar starting point. So Gert, what would you recommend? Deb's got some articles she's putting onto LinkedIn. She's got a book that's coming out which focuses on a specific audience. I'm not clear on what the difference audience means. I think that's some clarity that needs to be defined here. I get that's probably the key message of the core ethos of what you're conveying, but I think so I'd like Gert to sort of share some ideas around how to then make sure that the blogs are hitting and that actually they're attracting the audience to come and read it. Okay, good. You're on mute, mate.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I gave everything away while I was on mute. What it really comes down to, I appreciate explaining the context here. What it really comes down to is that the things that go on the blog have a clear keyword optimization. Okay, so a clear, not keyword optimization necessarily, a clear answer, like we talked with Brina before as well, a clear answer to a clear search. Okay, so there are key topics your potential audience is searching for. This can be very really varied, all kinds of topics, subtopics, whatever you think they could be interested in. Try to give an answer to their question. And this can come from conversations. This can come from some online research on sites like Quora.com or Reddit or forums or Facebook groups. Give an answer to questions your ideal target audience has, and then you have a chance to get those ranking. Instagram, LinkedIn, social media is going to allow you to bring across who you are, and depending on who is going to then share this or comment on this, you're getting some sort of snowball effect, especially on LinkedIn, going and then get in front of more eyeballs. But when it comes to your website, when it comes to SEO, you really need to write something people are searching for. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen. So I think this is where it goes back to you, and where it's okay, there must be an overall content strategy. SEO is a part of it. The SEO part needs to respond to things people are searching for, but everything else is really see how are we leveraging the different content assets that are there, and how can they play together? Can they complement themselves? Are they completely different things? Is the LinkedIn post maybe a short summary of a longer article, and we can drive traffic back from a shorter LinkedIn blog post and tell people there is a full version on the blog, so we can get them off the social media networks and onto the blog, where they can then sign up for a mailing list or whatever. I think this should definitely be part of the goal here. But then to get people directly to your website is really answering things people are searching for specifically. We can't do with general content. It's not going to do anything.
Good. When you did the launch of your, I know it wasn't a massive launch, but when you were putting the book out, what kind of ideas or strategies did you implement to get more eyes on, or I guess, how did you raise an awareness that the book was coming?
I think we did a really bad job about this, because this happened. The book honestly came out in a very, very busy agency time. So we just happened to have the book at some point, informed obviously a small mailing list we have. We informed people on social media. I think we ran some ads to the book as well. And then just really talked about it on other podcasts where we were guests on, some Facebook lives, etc. We are in a different situation. The book for us isn't what's going to make money. We give it away for free on a website. The book for us is a summary of how we want to approach SEO and how we think SEO should be done as a long-term strategy for clients. And this is just really the manifesto or the summary of what we think about SEO. We're not having a book because this is going to be the cornerstone piece of our entire strategy. We have an application for that, and the application is going to be pushed more and more, and probably with ads, probably through some referral channels, etc.
Yeah. So I mean, well, I was going to say, good. I see a similarity what Deb's doing, because her book is not a "hey, come buy my service" type book. It's more here's a story, here's a lived experience, and here's the type of people that might want to, that this could support, right? So people who are different in the communities, people who whatever oddballs as Deb called them, and people identify as that, right? So I think it's a really good. I think you could really use the book. It's an asset, Deb. Whether it's written or published, that's not the point. You can actually use this now to actually let people, these communities know, hey, this book is coming. And how, are you featuring members of the community, of those communities?
No, they came through. They came through a lesbian magazine. Oh no, definitely.
That's perfect.
Most of the groups are community groups as well.
So I would see you doing, getting onto their podcast, getting on, into their magazines and being interviewed by them as this person who's writing a book about our community, because that's really powerful, right? Like this is someone from within the community writing about the community. And then you could, do some interviews that way. They interview you. I mean, you could do your own interview series depending on your own time and resource and energy. But I definitely think at a minimum, reaching out to those, handful of groups that you're already active in, and saying, hey, like this book, I'm working on this book, is about to, you maybe have a launch date, but do you want to talk about what the book's about and some of the stories that I've been able to collect, and that's a really good way for them to profile you, right, as the author, because I think that's something that
Well, no, I'm not the author, I'm the editor.
You're the editor. Okay, that's fine, but that's a project you're working on. So yeah. And maybe you get both you and the author together, and you both get interviewed in the same interview.
Well, okay.
Right?
I know. Okay, that's right. Yeah, but no, I take what you're saying. That's great. Yeah,
because that's nice too. Because then you get the author on the interview saying how much it was a great time working with Deb, and what they liked about the experience. Right.
I would be the closest to an author, but it's not a book like that. I've done interviews with people, but it doesn't matter. It would probably be me. I doubt very much that they would go on to a podcast, but don't worry, the sort of cases I'm thinking of could do that job for me. Yeah.
So that's kind of your first step, is to really get profiled by different people with books and groups and whatever. That content, you can then put it onto your website, onto your blog. Okay, you could repurpose, you can put snippets, you can do different things. And then that's where, when you're doing that, this ties to what Gertie's saying, is you want to have clear keyword topics. You want to understand, what are people searching for in Google, okay? And there are tools out there, keyword research tools that you can use. Gert, is there one that comes to mind that you could recommend?
Absolutely. Answerthepublic.com, for example, could be interesting for Brina as well. Answer the Public. I'm going to put this into the chat. Answerthepublic.com.
Which one? Sorry.
Answerthepublic.com.
Oh, Answer the Public. Yes, thank you.
And this is where we just type in a topic. So, for example, gratefulness, we had it for, or gratitude. Yeah, gratitude was it. And then you're going to get questions people asking around gratitude. And then you can use those questions, type them into Google, see what's coming up, see if you can produce something similar. So whatever your topic comes to mind, you can use this, and this tool formulates questions. And when you see a question coming up a lot, and you start consistently, maybe every week you put up a blog post about one and with an answer of one of these questions, but do a little bit of research first, check out the page 1 ranking sites, get a feeling for what Google is looking for here, and then put this up on your site in your way, essentially.
What do you mean by page ranking site, Gert? Page ranking.
If you type in the question in Google.
Let's do a real one. Let's give an example. Okay, so here.
Okay.
So
we use gratitude doesn't.
Yep. Which one?
Copy one of those. Copy one of those into Google.
Okay, when gratitude doesn't work. Okay, so we put. All right, so we go into Google. We can then type in the key. So that tool is telling us this is something that people are searching for. Okay, Brina and Deb. And so you then take that keyword, you put it into Google, and you hit search. Okay, and now you're going to see all these articles that are on page 1. Okay, and what Gertie's saying is, Gert, so are we looking at, say, the first one, and we're seeing what's on that page?
I look through the top 10. So there are usually 10 results on the page. Google sometimes shifts different ways of approaching this into page 1. So I would definitely encourage you to just read through the top 10 articles. At least skim them, get an idea what the subsections are, how they are structured, how they present the content, how long is this, etc. And then go and write your own.
Yeah. So you can see.
I sometimes take some notes, get an idea what's the vocabulary, what are the subtopics, what are subsections. Do they have any illustrations? Is this photos? Is this even infographics? Is there a video embedded, etc.? What kind of presentation do I need to look into? Yeah, you can open them up in tabs, and then just go through the tabs, make some notes in a notepad or something like this, copy some phrases over, and then you already are not starting with a blank document anymore. You have a rough idea of what you're going to produce, and this is going to also make the process much more efficient.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you're just looking
Yeah,
at,
thanks.
yeah, you know, how is it structured? You know, do they have images? This one doesn't really have any images. So, you know, if you were to produce an article similar on a similar topic, right, then you could have images in yours, and that could be different. You could have a video in there. You could have audio. I even noticed there was a podcast that ranked number 3 or something here. So even podcasts can rank. So you can look at that. Good. Quick question for you. How do you get your article appearing here where it says people also ask?
This is usually comes back. Google very often identifies within an article what a question is and what an answer is, and they might extract this information from the website, or you can do a so-called schema markup or structured data markup. There are the Yoast plugin, for example, at least in the premium version, not sure about the free version, supports this also way, and there are some plugins out there that help you on a WordPress site that essentially tell Google in a coding format hidden on the from the website what a question is and what an answer is. So imagine an FAQ page. Google might not be able to identify what the question is and where the answer ends. But if you have the markup, you're telling Google specifically in coding, what is the question, what is the answer that belongs to this question, what is the next question, what is the answer, and Google can then extract this information and present it directly on the search results.
So you have to manually input the code to let Google know this is the...
Manually in a way, because you can search for some plugins on, there are plugins that help you do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a process where you usually do the markup or work on the markup to make sure this comes across. Or if it's absolutely clear, Google might extract questions and answers also directly, but usually you do the so-called FAQ markup here. Okay,
cool. So just quick recap. Thanks for the suggestions, Gert. So answertherepublic.com, start there. Deb, I think that's a good place.
No,
and
good.
then from there, that gives you ideas of what your content should be about. You can then turn that into articles, put that on your site, and go from there. Okay, and Brina, same as you, right? Okay. I've got one question I want to get answered before we wrap up the call. This is coming from Ryan. He couldn't join, but I wanted to just touch on it anyway. So the question is, what metrics to look at when building a following that will, well, he's also got a book that he's putting out, so this could relate to what Deb's doing. Okay, the audience is expats. He wants to help them to transition back home from whatever country they're in. And he's asking, what should he really be tracking when he's building his audience? So I've got some ideas, Gert. I wonder if you have any thoughts around this. I think maybe you had it. Is there an SEO related thing in here at all? I'm not sure.
I'm an expat, so I have my ideas. Yeah, I would probably search for specific questions again. There are Facebook groups of expats of every country essentially, so you can check out Facebook groups and just scan for questions or common questions, FAQ lists, etc. that come up, and you could be answering those questions on the blog, for example, and make sure that you have a good answer for them. I know that I am targeted as an Austrian living in Spain. I'm targeted specifically via Facebook ads as an expat. So you can target people from a certain country who live in another country, or at least you could a while ago. So I was specifically targeted, for example, with products from Austria. So products I would probably miss if I'm living in Spain. So there was a way to target this via Facebook ads. And from SEO, really just specific questions. How can I go back as an expat, or go back home after 10 years in Australia, whatever, kind of these kinds of questions. And definitely use platforms. I'm repeating Quora.com here, but Quora is really a good foundation of getting an idea what people are actually asking for. Yahoo Answers was the source for these things a while ago. We very often use Quora because it gives you a very good feeling without having to join a lot of Facebook groups of what specifically people are asking here.
I like those. I would also, just to address the metrics question, Ryan, the metrics start with what's your goal? What's the end goal, right? So if the end goal is to sell more books, okay, then one metric is how many book sales are you getting, right? If that's the goal. Right? If the goal is to build the audience who potentially might buy the book, then I would say, well, how are you tracking audience size? Is that an email list? Okay, if it is, then the metric here is email subscribers. Okay, so your metric has to be tied to what the objective is of your marketing activity. Okay, and that's kind of at a very high level. And then going down to, if you are running Facebook ads, then your metrics going to be, it could be your return on investment or your cost per click or your CPAs or these other things you want to get into there. It really comes down to what's the objective. And if I'm knowing where Ryan is and he's doing this sort of, bootstrapped, I would say then really measure your list size, people subscribing to your email list through the marketing activities that you're doing, and then also sales, or even one step before that is people downloading the first chapter of your book. This is what a lot of authors do. They offer the first chapter for free, and then that gives people an experience of the book, and then they can then, if they like the book, here's a link to go buy it on Amazon or order the book, whatever it may be. So that's another way to do that. Okay, so
in this context, if I just may add here, I really like the term or the concept of lead metrics, where I say, okay, what is happening before? Like you said, depending on your goal, certain things need to happen before. So in order to get a Facebook ad out, I have a click-through rate at some point. I have a potential reach. The reach could be the metric. The number of clicks I could get could be the metric. A bounce rate from the landing page could be the metric. How many people scroll down until they see the call to action could be a metric. The click conversion into lead, open rates, subject lines. You can go very much into detail. All these things are going to determine the final outcome. So if you have, like you say, Anthony, the end goal in mind, and then just try to lay the train tracks back to where you are, you're going to hit certain points. When this comes to SEO, if you want to have a certain amount of expats clicking through to your website, one step before this is a determined ranking. Before this ranking, there is a search volume. Before this search volume, there's probably a number of pieces of content you're going to need to write and get ranked. And then you have competitive metrics here. So really, depending on the channel, depending on a goal, identify what are the lead metrics that lead to eventually to the end goal, be it the book sale, be it a subscription, be it what another sale or whatever.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, I want to say thank you, everyone. We are well over time. Good. I really appreciate you staying on. I know it's really late night for you. You got to go have sleep soon.
No worries. Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to know you guys as well.
It's been amazing.
Thank you. It's great. Thank you.
So I will send I will send a replay of this video for all of you guys to review. And then we'll be back. We're going to have him come back at a later date to do part 2 of the SEO journey. And we're going to get a bit more deeper. And so I'm going to invite you to come and join us again on our next roundtable. Okay,
absolutely.
Thanks everyone.
Happy to do so.
Thank you
so much.
so much.
Right, have a wonderful
day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.